you, Maureen Maloney. Next, let's hear from Jonathan Heyman from FAIR.
Okay, yeah, okay, you can hear me, okay. So I'm going to talk a lot about the fiscal impact of illegal immigration and legal immigration, both nationally and here in Massachusetts. The main statement that I want to make is a statement by a famous economist you might know, Milton Friedman. He had a famous saying that open borders are incompatible with a generous welfare state. It was true when he said it back in the 70s, it's still true today. So I'll get into some figures in a minute, but I mean, we have to look at the scope of both legal and illegal immigration. Right now, we've got about 44 million foreign-born in our country. That includes 11 to 13 million illegal aliens. By some estimates, that's the DHS ICE estimate. There's a new study, I think Princeton and some other schools had it at 22 million. So that's, a quarter of this 44 million foreign-born who they may be newly naturalized Americans or legal permanent residents on a pathway to citizenship. So that's a lot of people who are eligible to collect benefits at both federal and state level. Now,
Can you speak up? Could you speak up,
yes.
please? Keep it, yeah. Everyone elevate, please. Yeah.
All right.
Just turn the sound up.
Okay, so if you look at the spending at the national level and at the state level, we had a study that there was a net loss of $116 billion in terms of programs that spend money on illegal immigrants. And that's net loss after taxes. So the National Academy of Sciences had a slightly different number. It was a $50 billion net loss after taxes. And George Borjas, the famous Harvard economist, also found a $50 billion net loss in money spent out on illegal immigrants at the federal and state level. Now, as you know, remittances, a lot of folks come here both legally and illegally. They send money out of the country. So there's about $150 billion that goes out per year from legal immigrants and illegal immigrants, and broke down to about $28 billion a year from just the illegal immigrants. Another very important study by our friends at Center for Immigration Studies found that in terms of welfare use of just immigrant households, however defined, 51% of those households use at least one welfare program. That's as compared to 30% of the native-born American population. So it's their use of social benefit programs is really quite high. The immigrant population, there's about 1.5 million legal plus illegal coming in every year, and you've got they're 57% more likely to use food stamps than your average American household, 33% more likely to use cash welfare, and the list goes on. And that study found the average immigrant household costs the American taxpayer $6,200 in welfare. So that's a lot of numbers, and what are we to make of it? Well, here in Massachusetts, locally, our study, we found that in 2017, there was about a total of $2 billion spent on illegal immigrants and their children. That was for programs that included education, policing and correctional facilities, healthcare, public services, general expenses. And the reason this happens, by the way, all states in the union are required to provide minimum benefits to all residents. And you're also, as a result of the Plyler versus Doe lawsuit case, you are allowed, every child from wherever they might be, whether they're illegal or not, is entitled to a free public education. So those are the reasons that you have this $2 billion per year going out from the Massachusetts taxpayers to illegal immigrants or children of illegal immigrants, who many of them would be here illegally. But so what does this mean in a Massachusetts context? $1 billion here, $1 billion there, pretty soon you're talking real money. What is $2 billion in Massachusetts dollars. Well, I'm not a budget expert, but I just went and looked at the data that I could find on Ballotpedia. I found that, in 2016, the total state spending here in Massachusetts was estimated at $60 billion. Now, the collection of taxes in Massachusetts was $27 billion. And the total state debt in Massachusetts, $75 billion that, has to be paid out to, let's say, folks who are retiring or bond issues or other mandated spending. Now, of course, the federal government does kick a lot of money into every state as part of that $60 billion total spending. But this, if you do the math, $2 billion out of that $60 billion is 3.3% of your total state spending goes straight to illegal immigrants, and likewise, that's about 2.6% of your total Massachusetts state debt. So I need to wrap up my introduction, so I'll just say quickly that, when you look at legal permanent residents, people on a path to citizenship, in most recent years, there's about 1 million a year, and in the breakdown of that, you've got about 400,000 are coming through chain migration. All right, so you might have somebody who comes here legally on a pathway to citizenship with their spouse, maybe they're unmarried minor children, but they can have uncles, aunts, so on, any close relative, and those people trickle in throughout the years, and so, you don't know who they are, what their skill set is, what their criminal record might be. But when you look at that breakdown of that million coming illegally, estimates I've seen, only 1 out of 8, 125,000 roughly, are sort of high-skilled, high-education level immigrants. So when we look at the reforms that you saw just a couple weeks ago when Trump made the big statement in the Rose Garden, he was making a plan with Jared Kushner for merit-based immigration. We're talking about trying to flip that ratio where it's sort of 1 out of 8 are these really high-skilled immigrants, to try to sort of make it the other way around and have this merit-based testing. Also, you might have seen Tom Cotton's RAISE Act. There's all kinds of ways you can get points and merit-based education, or merit-based evaluation. And really, I think the U.S., many other countries have this, and so that is something that I think could help to solve many of the fiscal problems that we have, and I'll be able to give you more breakdown on that later. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan Hayden from FAIR. And next, we're going to hear from Jasmine Grace.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jasmine Grace. I'm a survivor of sex trafficking and also the founder and director of an outreach ministry called Bags of Hope. And Bags of Hope serves vulnerable women that are in substance abuse programs, domestic violence shelters, people living on the street, homeless shelters, in prison, anywhere we can find vulnerable women, because we know that a lot of vulnerable women have been through the commercial sex trade, whether that's because of their own addictions, because they were put into the commercial sex trade as children by their own family members, or maybe as kids from the DCF foster care system, runaways that were picked up by traffickers as children, and then they didn't exit the commercial sex trade until they were adult women, who then looked like they made that choice to become a prostitute. But really we know that prostitution, trafficking is all based on our vulnerabilities. And so that's the women that we work with, because I'm a survivor. I know firsthand what it's like to be a vulnerable kid, growing up to be a vulnerable woman, and then being trafficked from the age of 19 to 25 to then get out and get addicted to opiates as a way to cope with all the trauma that I had dealt with for those years under my trafficker, only to spiral out of control because of the drug addiction, and then finally put my life together by God's grace in 2007. So I've been clean and sober and out of that life for almost 12 years. I'm expecting the applause till the end. That's great, thank you. So here I am today, sober, with my own organization, lots of volunteers for the organization. We also are a community-based organization, so the bags that we give these women are all filled with basic toiletries, things we use every day that we may take, for granted: soap, shampoo, conditioner, toothpaste, a cute pair of socks, maybe some nail polish. And we give out over 1,000 bags a year to all these women across Massachusetts, and I've just moved to New Hampshire, so we're expanding the organization up there. So if you'd like to be involved, or if you'd like to donate or help us financially, because we are a nonprofit, and my book is on that table back there. We give that book out to women as well that have these histories, because a lot of these women don't self-identify. They don't know they're trafficking victims because they've been so manipulated and brainwashed and coerced, or so abused since childhood that they think that's normal. They think that's their life, they think that's all they're worth. And so that book goes out to a lot of women, and also women who aren't survivors, and men who read that book are really encouraged and blessed as well, because it educates and it just raises so much awareness. So we give out the book, the bags, and my little piece of this story for me to connect with illegal immigration is that once I finally identified as a sex trafficking survivor, I was in recovery from substance abuse for the first 5 years, and I did not know I was a victim or a survivor, because my trafficker did such a good job at manipulating and brainwashing me that I believed that I loved him and that I chose to be a prostitute. But then once I received more healing and started to identify as a survivor because somebody told me that I was, all the lights came on and everything changed for me, and the shame was lifted, and I was then empowered. And I started to share my story and do a lot of public speaking, and I got offered a job at a nonprofit in Boston that hired survivors to be mentors to at-risk youth, to these girls who are at high risk or girls that had been commercially sexually exploited. And I couldn't believe that half the interview was for me to share my story, and I was hired. And once I got this job, I fell in love with all those young girls I was mentoring. They were all under 18 years old. Again, lots of vulnerabilities, lots of problems, some coming from homes, in Tewksbury and Andover and places you never think trafficking happens, to homes in Chelsea and Lawrence and Lowell, places where you might think that it happens. So it's all over, right? Trafficking doesn't just happen in one place. But this one girl in particular that I began to mentor, she was from El Salvador, and she was brought here by her mother. She was sent for, so her mother had been here maybe 10 years prior. She left El Salvador when she was, the little girl was around 2 years old, with a grandmother. And the mom, I don't know how the mom came over, whether it was legally or illegally, I don't know that part, but she had come and she had lived in Chelsea. And finally she paid however much, I think it was $7,000 or $8,000 into the Coyotes, who then brought her over illegally. And when she finally arrived to Chelsea, Mass, she was about 12 years old, and she started a relationship with the mom's boyfriend's brother. Well, he started a relationship with her. He was about 27 years old. He was El Salvadorian as well, MS-13 gang member, related. And once the mother walked in a bedroom and opened the door and saw them together, she got upset, kicked him out, and forbid him to come back around ever again. But then slowly but surely, of course, the guy still came around and coerced and manipulated her into coming with him, and he took her to New York. And now once they got to New York, she was probably about 13, 14 years old about this time. And she was very thin, very young, very, very naive, spoke English, but very brokenly. And he dropped her off at a New York hospital in the emergency room because something was wrong with her, something was going on. She gave birth to a baby who was only 22 weeks gestation. And this baby was born alive, but the eyes were still shut, fused together because it was so new. She did not even know she was pregnant. She lied, all the information on the birth certificate was wrong. She was scared, she was afraid, she was alone. He just dropped her off and left her there. And about 3 days goes by, she finally tells a social worker the real information, the truth about who she is, and they reach out to the mom and call her. And the mom comes from Chelsea, and they had to leave the baby there for 3 months because the baby needed that many surgeries and that much time in the NICU to grow stronger and healthier. So finally, when she gets back to Chelsea, that's how I became her mentor, because obviously she was an at-risk, vulnerable kid. I don't know the story if the MS-13 gang member ever trafficked her or if he was about to traffic her once he got her to New York. I don't know that situation, I get them that deep. But what I was there for was to support her and encourage her and share my story with her and let her know that no matter what she's been through, we get better, we get well, we just gotta press in and persevere through all that. And we had to tap into some funds and some grants to get this baby back home to Chelsea after a 3-month stay in the hospital, because you couldn't just drive to New York to the hospital and pick her up in a regular car, but she needed like an ambulance ride back because she had breathing tubes, she had all types of medical issues and things, and the hospital wanted to be very, very cautious that she was being brought home safely and correctly, and even made sure that the MGH was, in contact, and she had follow-up appointments and so forth. So I held this girl's hand throughout this whole process. We got her the funds, and the baby came back, and we went to so many appointments. And here's this young girl, right? She's barely 14. She barely speaks English. Her mom is not really supportive, doesn't want her daughter to, be in these situations, but had a little resistance at first, and DCF was involved, and it was messy. But this baby kept growing and getting stronger. We did tons of early intervention, and I just saw this baby grow and flourish and do well. And yes, she did get tons of Massachusetts state benefits. Now that I'm thinking of it, she was on WIC, she was on food stamps, Mass Health, all those types of things that she needed. But at that moment, of course I wasn't thinking of those things then, I was just there to support this girl. And so I mentored her for about a year or two, and like I said, I watched this girl raise this little baby. They moved into actually a foster home shortly after, I forget why, but it just wasn't safe and stable for her to live with her mom in Chelsea, so she went to a foster home. She did well there. She took the baby with her. I really advocated for that because the workers, the DCF workers were separating them, and I was like, well, you're trying to help this young girl become a mom, and you want the baby to stay with her, so she needs the baby with her in order to learn how to become a mother and have the support of this foster mom to help her understand what it's like to be a safe, supportive mom to this baby and so forth. So by the time I stopped mentoring her, she was in high school. She was going to Chelsea High, and I believe there was a daycare in Chelsea High for moms with babies. And she would bring her daughter to school, and last I heard, she graduated high school. The baby was probably 5 or so by then, healthy, strong, doing well. They touched my heart in so many ways. This family, I loved them so much. She had been so much trauma. I never even got to talk to her about what it was like coming through the back roads with the coyotes, all that. God only knows what kind of trauma or whatever this young girl experienced just coming over the border that way. Never mind the trauma she must have experienced with this guy that she thought she loved and loved her. So that's about all I can say about that. Again, I have lots to share again about my story and the work that I do today, so if you'd like to chat, we can have questions, or you can meet me over there at the table. So thank you.